Hello and welcome to today's workshop. So today we're going to be talking about how to leverage and profit from your experience and expertise. So let's dive in. Let's start by understanding your value and worth in the market for information. And this is a pretty important aspect of everything we're going to be talking about. It's the first concept that you really do have to understand. And it's typically one of the things that people trip up over when they start thinking about, well, who wants to hear from me? Why would I even want to do an online course? Who's going to buy it from me? And you do have to understand your value or worth in the market for information, but you have to understand it in the right way. And the real world and potential value of your store of knowledge is going to be different than in other places. And basically, one way of valuing the information that you have is solely based on an audience model. Let me explain what I mean by that. Basically, people assume that you're going to sell that information based on the audience wanting to know your story. And so that is one way of being able to sell a book or sell information based on the fact that someone found out about you or someone knows about you, and they're really interested in you as a human being. And as a result of that, you will then share with them information and they will buy that information. That means then that a person that's had exposure in the public eye, and this is what really trips people up because they feel like I'm not a public figure. And so who wants to really know what it is I've got to teach or what I've got to say? Typically, when a person has had exposure in the public eye, they can sell products or books. You've probably heard people use this as a term called, someone's 15 minutes of fame. A person has their 15 minutes of fame. They take advantage of those 15 minutes by making sure that they put something in front of you to remind you that, hey, they're still relevant, even if their movement is going to be over. And the help that they share may be valuable, right? So, in other words, it may be valuable, but it's only secondary to their status. So, in other words, if someone has something that puts them in the public eye, and it may be something totally unrelated, the information that they share, and quite honestly, when someone buys that book and when somebody buys an information product, it's not necessarily as a result of the fact that we know they've got value to share, but it's typically only going to be secondary to their status. Because in other words, we wouldn't have even found out about them. We wouldn't even know about them. We wouldn't even care if they wouldn't have status. And again, you just have to understand that just because that's not you, that doesn't mean that you can't sell your knowledge, experience, and expertise. So, in other words, the more that person like that, or people like that, or even you in some cases can gain prominence and status, the more likely it will be that you can sell products. In other words, if you can keep that status, you can sell products again to people that want them. And you see this every single day. And you hear people say that there's no such publicity as bad publicity as long as you're in the public eye and you can continue to sell things. And to some degree, that is going to be true. But that's one model of being able to do it. And if you don't necessarily have prominence or status, you don't need to feel like, well, I can't bring my product in front of people. I can't bring my knowledge in front of people. No one wants to hear about me and my expertise. I want you to hang with me here. So I'm going to explain to you why that's not true. Now, this is only one way of being able to develop the worth that I talked about. Remember, we started all this by saying you've got to understand and develop the worth to sell some kind of advice or information. This kind of worth can be short-lived. That's why people call it the 15 minutes of fame, because sometimes it really does last for a short period of time. In other words, when that person's time passes in the public eye, people are not necessarily going to want to have their book or their t-shirts or their whatever it is that they're selling, but definitely going to be their advice that's going to be the case. Because again, it isn't based on the value that a person sees and what the person gets from the purchase. That's why this kind of worth is only going to be short-lived. Because in other words, they were never even approached because of the value that they had. They were approached because of the status that they had. And it's typically going to be based on the connection to an individual and their experience. So in other words, what that person typically has got to do is they've got to keep making the connection to an audience. They've got to keep getting the audience to emote. They've got to keep getting the audience feeling what they feel. And again, it is a business model and it is a way of being able to sell information. Now, in some cases, when you can do this successfully, and this may be you, you may be able to pull an audience together. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't sell information, but what I will say about that is this. These days, it's very easy that if you can gather an audience on a regular basis, and I mean a big audience, and your audience is growing and they are emotionally connected to you, you have the opportunity to sell access to that audience through sponsors, right? Used to be that the only way you get sponsored was you had to have a big television show or big radio show or something like that. But these days, if you can bring that kind of audience together, even on the internet, and I'm not going to go into all the ways you can do that, but if you can bring an audience together and you can bring them to see you, you can get that audience to be monetizable by bringing sponsors to the audience. So in other words, you gather attention, right? You don't necessarily share information. Your information may or may not be valuable, but your value is to a sponsor, not necessarily to the audience. Now, the audience-based business model can be used to sell information or advice still. You can sell a book, right? If you can bring an audience and keep that audience. You can sell a course if you can bring an audience and keep that audience. You can sell a live session just by having celebrities on with you. And when I say celebrities, I mean small c. I mean then that people who can be a celebrity for that moment or for that period of time. Now, there is another way of determining the value of knowledge and information and expertise, and that's very important to understand, especially if you're looking to sell an online course. You're looking to profit from your experience and your expertise. One of the ways to come to the market is to lead with a solution. In other words, you understand intimately a problem or set of problems because you've worked with those problems. It is your area of expertise. You know how to explain the problem. There are probably cases where you could probably explain the person's problem to them better than they understand it. And I'll tell you what, now if you understand, and a lot of you probably do understand the problem better than the person who's having the problem, you have the opportunity to share expertise. That's one of the ways you can tell. Now again, what this means now is that we've got the opposite situation. This means that your story is secondary to the needy individual, right? So in other words, people have not come to you because of your story necessarily. They came to you because you've got a solution to a problem. Now, it doesn't mean your story isn't relevant. It is. It doesn't necessarily mean that your story is not going to be something that keeps people emotionally attached, because it will. But it means then that the primary reason that people are attached to you is because you are satisfying a need. Your story is secondary, right? Again, status will still assist you in this way. Now you've got high status. It's only going to help you. It's not going to hurt you. But your value and worth in this case is determined by, now listen and understand this. This is very important to the entire process. The value and worth of the information. So please do not feel like, well, no one wants to know what I've got to say. That has nothing to do with it. The value and worth is determined by how badly a customer or a set of customers want a solution to the problem you're solving. You know, we might have, let's say, 10 books on one subject. We might have 10 magazines on one subject. So understand something. When someone really wants a solution, they will look for the solution that works for them. One of them might be yours. And it might be the fact that you may share one thing with them that all the other pieces of information did not. So understand, what matters is not you. You are not important. You don't matter. What matters is the information you're sharing and how badly and desperately does the person want that information. So again, now this is going to be subtle, but I want you to kind of focus in and understand what I'm saying. The market for information doesn't move according to the problems a customer should solve. So in other words, people don't go and get information because of the things they should be doing. Typically, all the things we should be doing, we don't go and seek information out on those things until they become a crisis and we have to solve them. So there are a lot of things we know we should be doing. We're not going to get information on those things. We don't necessarily go and seek that out. That's just the way the human machine is built. Here's how information moves. Information moves on the basis of emotion. People are desperate to solve a problem, and they're desperate to move away from something that's causing them pain, and frantic to move towards something they want. So when you start thinking about, I'm going to share my expertise, I'm going to share with people the things that they should be doing so that they can make some kind of improvement. At our base level, none of us really likes to improve, right? We don't want to improve first. We don't want to improve until later. We then move towards something that's so on fire that we have to solve it, or something that's so huge and so bright and so shiny we have to have it. So again, when you start thinking about what am I going to share with people? What am I going to sell in terms of my information? What am I going to help people with? You start by looking at the things people are desperate to solve or frantic to move towards. Don't look toward the things that, hey, you know what? I know you really need to do this. I'm going to share that information. And this is one of those things that's a very important distinction you have to make when you're looking to create information that you're going to sell. Now, this is a very important question because you will hear people say, I'm going to share my passion and people are going to come to me because I'm just passionate about it. Well, the market doesn't work that way, right? People don't come because you're passionate necessarily. But then if it doesn't work that way, then how do you meet the market? Where do you intercept the market? How do you connect your expertise to a marketplace? Now, here's a very important point. You will typically meet the need of a market before a person or group is desperate to solve it. So in other words, a lot of times you already have the knowledge, but you probably don't have the knowledge as to what people need to know right now, but it will become a problem in the future. Now, you know, a lot of us do social media. We do blogs, we do videos. One of the things you do, and one of the things that we have discussed in our membership, we talk about this all the time, is planting your flag. You've got to plant your flag, and one of the reasons why you want to plant your flag is because when that becomes a problem to people, you want to be on record as the one who knows how to solve that problem. And again, it doesn't mean you have to be the only person, but you do have to be on record, and if you can be on record ahead of time, you will have that credibility. Now, the other thing that's important to understand is that you need to be documenting now those solutions. So you've got to get your documentation into course form. You've got to get it into a form that people are going to get it. And so you've got to start documenting your solution. Listen, if you know how to solve problems, typically by the time you get to a point and it becomes a crisis in someone's life, and you've got to scramble to share what you know, you're going to miss the market sometimes. And a lot of times, someone who is of a lesser talent, how many of you have seen this? How many of you experienced where someone who knows less is just there in the right place at the right time? And the reason you weren't there in the right place in the right time is not because you're not knowledgeable, it's because you didn't have it ready when it was time. Now, there's no way to know when something's going to be hot ahead of time, so you've got to do it ahead of time and be ready. So you kind of have to start outlining your solutions now. And sometimes those solutions, none of them will sell, but oftentimes they'll sell, but they'll sell better later when the market meets your expertise. Now that person is going to find you. Number one, why? Because you're out there, right? You're on record. Number two, because it's documented, it's ready to go. And most times people don't document their solution. You know, one of the keys to being able to market information is to use margin. So in other words, say you have a lot of leftover time right now, you can't use that time unwisely. Sometimes you got to be using your time, your leftover time, putting your solutions into a form ahead of time so that when the market comes and it wants a solution and you've got it, you're ready to go and you're ready to sell it. And you're not going to lose out to somebody who knows less than you, who can explain it worse than you, but it's just in the right place at the right time. So you got to start creating your potential solutions now, right, as you discover them. Many times where you have an area of expertise, you start discovering things long before people know them and before the market is ready. Everybody that I know who's involved in information marketing, and even people outside, people tend to be ahead of their time. You tend to be ahead of your time. You tend to know things before they happen. And because you don't document them and you're not on record, again, someone lesser wins. So you've got to start documenting your potential solutions now. You have margin, you have leftover time right now. Use your leftover time to document your solution so that you're ready to go when the market is ready. Now you got to create a solution that's going to be easy for a customer to buy. So how do you do that? Well, you've got to make sure that it's easy for a customer to get into their system. It's got to be easy to consume. And you do this by creating an online course. Obviously, that's what we've been talking about. And an online course is work that you do one time. That's what's really important about this. So it's really not work, because if you're doing what we talked about before, which is documenting your processes, all you're really doing is making it available to people. You've got to make your solution available to people that don't have time or the desire to read an entire book. There are people who are like that. I listen to audiobooks, but sometimes there are just times I don't even have time to read a real book. And there are a lot of people who don't have time to read books. They need to be able to get a course where you can show them in 1 hour exactly what it is that they need to do. They don't have the resources to purchase counseling. So in other words, they need a solution. They need expertise, but they don't have the money to go out and pay somebody $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 for their time or to solve the problem. You can sometimes deliver that, $1,000 solution to 50 people and still get the $1,000 that you would be due if you counsel somebody. And some people, quite honestly, they don't have a temperament to follow one-on-one coaching. So in other words, there are people who will pay for coaching. They get told what to do and they still don't do it, right? There are people who are like that. So you could actually have a student or a client and you tell them what to do and they're not going to do it. And the way life works is that, again, it may be because that they didn't do the work, but you may still get the blame. Well, yeah, I worked with he or she, but I didn't really get the results. But it's really because they didn't do the work. Some people don't have a temperament to follow coaching. And so when you're outlining a solution, people can listen to you in order to get away from that problem, right? They're desperate to get away from a problem. They can get away from it. They can get to a solution finally, and you've got the answer. So how do you move forward on this? So what do you need to do? Well, the next step you've got to do, and again, you should be documenting. As soon as you get off this workshop, you should be documenting, and you should be documenting solutions in 1-hour bits, 1-hour chunks. I call them modules or courses. And here's a rule of thumb. Now, again, there are going to be some exceptions to this. This is not a hard and fast rule. You should be documenting your solutions, and you should be thinking of them in 1 hour. People's attention spans don't really expand beyond probably 40 or 45 minutes. Really, you can go as long as an hour, but you really should be talking about 45 minutes to an hour. And think about what topics you're qualified to explain. And sometimes you might have to get more qualified. Sometimes you might have to do an expert interview. But even to do an expert interview, understand this. You do need to understand the right questions to ask. So if you don't know the right questions to ask, and you've probably sat through interviews where someone didn't quite know the right questions to ask, and yeah, they had a great person, but they didn't know what to ask them. And so the interview turned out to be a dud. Not because the guest wasn't great, but because the person doing the interview did not have the expertise to ask the person the right questions that would help you. So again, if you're thinking about getting interviews, just make sure it's going to be an area of expertise because you don't know the right questions unless you do. Now, you've got to start organizing according to what you can explain in 1 hour. Again, I want to come back to that 1 hour piece. Please don't start doing 2, 3, 4, 5 hour courses. Now, in some cases, you might combine, different topics where you might combine something into a bundle, but in general, try to keep it down within an hour. And here's how you do it. Take each topic and outline it into presentation slides. So in other words, what you're going to do is, each set of slides is going to equal 1 course, right? So again, however you do it, you're going to do an hour's worth of time. You're going to do 1 set of slides, which is going to be 1 course. And within that, you're going to do each section so that each slide is going to represent 1 idea. So sometimes, maybe if you have a 5-minute concept, right, it's going to be on 1 slide. Or, maybe it might take you 2 slides to explain 1 concept. So in other words, you're going to have 24 slides, and that's all you're doing is organizing. Not saying you got to use it, I'm just saying it's a good way to visually organize your information. So you got to start by organizing your expertise. If you have not gone through this process, this is a very important thing you need to do. Remember those solutions I talked to you about, the ones that the market doesn't know they need yet? They're not ready to buy them right now, but you've got to get ready to sell them before the market hits them. Now again, you're going to have to turn that document into something consumable and digestible for the individual. How do you make it consumable? Now you're going to have to make it so that somebody can get into it. And if your customer can consume it and they like it, you know what they're going to do? They'll probably purchase more. And so the name of this game is being able to really serve people with your expertise. That's really what you're doing. You're serving people, and you don't have to be a celebrity because it's not about being a celebrity. No one's coming to you because of your story. Understand something. When someone has a problem, who are they looking out for? They're looking out for themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what people should be doing. People are coming to you not because of you. They're coming to you because they're looking out for themselves. And if you can understand that, you can get over this fear of, well, man, I'm nobody. Who wants to hear from me? It's not about you. It's about them. So this is the leverage you did by putting your expertise into an online course. Now, again, if you're documenting right now and you're getting ready, You're getting ready for that period before it happens. And now again, I will say this also. Now, you might have the solution to a problem that people need right now. Now, if you have that, you want to go ahead and start documenting the solution to that and getting it in front of the people. But typically, you probably know some stuff that people don't know. You got to get it down. You got to get it written. You got to go on record and get out in public. And it's a technical process. You might have to record some videos. You might have to record some audios. You might have to create some PDFs. You're going to have to bundle up the content. You're going to have to host it. You're going to have to make it deliverable to people. And you're going to have to make that deliverable ready for sale. That's what an online course is really about. And if you can do that right, all of the expertise you have, if you make it consumable, you'll be able to get it in front of people. And again, you're going to do that work one time, and you're going to be able to sell it over and over again to people that need a solution that you already have and you have documented. Okay, that was a lot. Are there any questions? Okay, now we do have an over-the-shoulder course to help you out with this that walks you through the entire technical process of product creation. It covers everything from the equipment needed, creating presentation content, recording video content, recording audio content, creating text content, and creating image content, preparing your content for sale, bundling your content, hosting your content, and developing your sales process. If you would like, you can find out more about that training at impc.ws/PCP. I do want to say, though, that the best way to get that course is to be one of our Digital Retirement Rebels insiders. You can see why I say that by going to impc.ws/14day. And if you would like to get signed up for our newsletter, you can do that at improfitscoach.com. Okay, so hopefully this has been helpful to you. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and let me know. And please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification. And I will see you again soon. Take care, everybody.